Chapter 11. Alternative Paths. The anticipation of dinner with Pedro that night had dominated my thoughts throughout the late afternoon. I carefully chose what to wear, mentally rehearsed the words I would say, imagined how it would be to finally define what was happening between us. Until my phone vibrated with a terse message. "Sofia, I need to cancel tonight. Something came up, talk later." I felt my stomach sink. I responded immediately. "Did something happen? Is everything okay?" Nothing. The silence from the other end was deafening. I sent 2 more messages throughout the night, each more anxious than the previous one. The blue check mark appeared, but Pedro didn't respond. The following day was an exercise in self-control. With each vibration of the phone, my heart accelerated, only to decelerate with disappointment. No news from him. Not an explanation, not an excuse, just silence. Fair tried to distract me, suggesting movies, offering wine, proposing outings. I refused everything. There was something deeply humiliating about being left hanging after the intimacy we had shared, after experiencing a vulnerability that I rarely allowed myself. Finally, at the end of the following day, the message I had been waiting for arrived, but its content was like a stab. "Sofia, we need to talk. Last night I went out with someone else. It happened. Well, you understand. I'm doing what you suggested, enjoying college without ties. Sorry to do this by message." I read and reread the words, trying to find some less painful interpretation. There wasn't one. On the same night he was supposed to be having dinner with me, Pedro was in someone else's arms, exactly as I had suggested he do when I broke up with him. The irony was caustic. The anger I felt was immediate and absolute. It wasn't just jealousy, it was indignation. He had sought me out, had said he missed me, had made love to me as if I were the center of his universe, only to run to someone else as soon as I mentioned York again. Perhaps the mask had finally fallen. Pedro wasn't the mature and different man I had imagined. He was just a boy, a very sophisticated, very intelligent, very seductive boy, but still a boy. A freshman in college doing exactly what first-year boys do, experimenting with everything they can. Almost without realizing it, I found myself in the kitchen, opening a bottle of red wine that I was saving for a special occasion. There was nothing special about having your heart broken, but it seemed appropriate somehow. After the second glass, the anger began to give way to a more complex feeling, a mixture of disappointment and relief. Perhaps it was better this way. Perhaps this would make my trip less complicated, less painful. By the third glass, my thoughts began to drift toward Fair and our conversation in the park. There was something liberating about the way she approached life, how she embraced experiences without fear of judgment. Perhaps that's what I needed now, to free myself from expectations, from pre-established scripts, from rigid plans that left no room for the unexpected. I picked up my phone, the wine giving me a courage I would normally lack. "Hi, friend. I discovered that Pedro traded me for someone else. I think I need to expand my horizons too. Remember when you talked about exploring unknown territories? What if I told you I want you to be the first visitor to my still unmapped territories?" I sent it before I could overthink what I was proposing. Half a minute later, I saw the 3 dots dancing on the screen. Then, "HAHAHA, friend, have you been drinking? But I'm intrigued. And I would accept with one condition, total reciprocity. I explore, you explore. Deal." My heart raced. Was this meant to be a joke, a drunken flirtation, or were we really considering this? "Deal. I'm already a bit drunk, I confess. Are you coming home tonight?" I responded, feeling my fingers tingle with anxiety. "I'm having dinner with Arter, but I can make up that I need to leave. I'll say I'll make it up to him later. If you'll leave any energy for him, I'm on my way." I ran to the bathroom, turning on the shower. Part of me was in shock about the direction the night was taking, part in an unknown state of excitement. The water falling on my skin seemed more intense than normal, each drop a small electric discharge of anticipation. I closed my eyes, letting the water run down my body, trying to process what was about to happen. Was I really considering exploring this territory with Fair? Was it just the anger at Pedro pushing me toward something impulsive? Or was it something that had always been latent, waiting for the right moment to emerge? The sound of the bathroom door opening made me open my eyes. Fair was there, fully dressed, hair loose, eyes shining with a mixture of hesitation and desire I had never seen before. "You were quick," I managed to say, suddenly very aware of my nudity. "I told Arter you were having a crisis." She approached the shower, still fully dressed, the water beginning to soak her white blouse. It wasn't exactly a lie. The sight of her wet blouse becoming transparent, revealing the form and color of her skin, awakened something in me that I had long kept dormant. Fair had always been beautiful. I always knew that, always noticed, always appreciated from afar. But seeing her like this, water running down her face, her intense gaze fixed on mine, was something completely different. Her hands found my shoulders, sliding slowly down my arms, causing goosebumps that had nothing to do with the water temperature. When her fingers reached my waist, I instinctively took a step closer, eliminating the space between us. "Your blouse is ruined," I murmured, my own fingers finding the hem of the soaked fabric. "I think we need to solve that," she whispered, her voice deeper than usual. I began to unbutton her blouse with trembling fingers, each button revealing more of that skin I had briefly known years ago, but never fully explored. When I finally freed her from the wet garment, I took a moment to appreciate the contrast. Her skin lighter than mine, the soft curve where her neck met her shoulder, so different from the firmness I was accustomed to with Pedro. My hands found hers, our palms pressing together, fingers intertwining. It was a moment of silent confirmation. Yes, we want this. Yes, we are ready. Her lips met mine with gentleness, but without hesitation. A kiss that began soft, exploratory, and gradually grew in intensity. Her taste was different, softer, with notes of the wine she had probably drunk at dinner. Her hands slid into my wet hair, while mine found her waist, pulling her closer. The water continued to fall over us, creating an encapsulated intimacy, as if we were in our own world inside the shower. There was no more Pedro, no academic career, no impossible decisions, just the mutual discovery, the exploration of a territory both familiar and completely new. I helped her get rid of the rest of her soaked clothes, each piece revealing more of her beauty. There was a vulnerability in her gaze that I had never seen before. Fair, always so confident, always so sure, now showing a softer, more open side. Our hands explored with curiosity and reverence. The contours of a shoulder, the curve of a waist, the texture of wet skin. I recognized in her touches the same hesitation I felt, as if we were rediscovering something we already knew, but now with a new intention, a new context. "You're beautiful," she whispered against my neck, her lips tracing a path that made my breathing falter. "You too," I responded, surprised by the sincerity of the statement. Fair really was beautiful, not just aesthetically, but in her confidence, in her freedom, in her capacity to live authentically. When the water temperature began to cool, we turned off the shower and dried each other with soft towels, each touch lingering a bit longer than necessary, each glance carrying questions and promises. "I have something that might interest us," she said with an enigmatic smile, taking my hand and leading me to her bedroom. Her bedroom was illuminated only by the bedside lamp, creating a cozy and intimate environment. From a small box beside the bed, she revealed some accessories that I had never seen before, explaining with a mixture of technical knowledge and light humor how each one worked. "We don't need to use any of this," she assured, noting my expression of surprise. "We can just—" "No," I interrupted with a confidence I didn't know I possessed. I want to experiment, everything. Her smile lit up the room. Let's take it slow, then, and if something doesn't feel good, just say so. With delicacy, Fair placed her hands on my legs, slowly approaching. Her lips touched my skin with reverence, like a precious treasure that demanded all the delicacy in the world. Each kiss provoked shivers that ran through my body, awakening dormant sensations, until her lips found the center of my desires. "My God," I whispered, as involuntary sounds escaped, witnesses to the mastery with which Fair conducted me to pleasure. My hands found her hair, while she created a symphony of sensations, her eyes fixed on mine with an expression of almost adoration. Gradually, I began to forget all the restraints, all the inhibitions, surrendering to the experience with a delivery that surprised even myself. It was no longer my best friend there. It was a lover whose intimacy with me transcended conventions. After bringing me to a climax that made stars dance behind my closed eyelids, Fair slid up my body, depositing kisses along the way until she reached my ear, murmuring in an amused tone, "Friend, my jaw is hurting." Her ability to transform any moment into something light made me burst into laughter. "Friend, I already got there a long time ago," I responded between laughs. With a look of satisfaction upon hearing my words, she picked up a belt and a bottle, now speaking in a more serious but equally sweet voice. "Let's move on to the exploration part." What followed was a journey of surprising discoveries. Fair guided me with patience and attention, alternating between soft caresses and firmer touches, always attentive to my reactions. There was a natural understanding between us, as if our bodies spoke a shared language that dispensed with words. The experience of having someone accessing places never before visited created sensations I didn't know were possible. There were initial moments of discomfort, it's true, but Fair always paused, always checked my well-being before continuing. Gradually, the initial pain transformed into a strange and fascinating pleasure, revealing aspects of my body I had never explored. When ecstasy finally came again, it was like a wave that began at the extremities and converged to the center, then spread in all directions. A moan escaped my lips, loud enough to make Fair comment something about the neighbors with an amused smile. The sheets around us were completely disheveled, some even damp. Between laughter and sips of wine straight from the bottle, I caught my breath, feeling a freedom I rarely experienced. "And now," I said, feeling a new confidence grow inside me, "it's my turn to be the explorer." Fair lay on her stomach, giving me a look over her shoulder that combined vulnerability and confidence. "I'm in your hands, Professor." Being the person in control was a completely new experience. With Pedro, even when I assumed dominant positions, I always felt that he maintained final control of the situation. Now, observing Fair completely surrendered to my guidance, I experienced a different kind of power, not about domination, but about responsibility and gift-giving. I followed her example, using my fingers to gradually prepare her, attentive to each response, each sigh. There was something deeply intimate in being trusted with this vulnerability, in exploring territories of hers that few knew. The moment I introduced the accessory that she had used with me was transformative. Her sounds, the tension of her body, the way she responded to each movement created a connection between us that transcended the physical. Coordinating this exploration required a concentration that surprised me, a balance between giving and observing that was both mental and physical. When she reached climax, it was with a visible intensity, her fingers gripping the sheets, her body arching, a deep moan that seemed to emanate from the center of her being. The awareness that I was the direct cause of that response gave me a satisfaction different from anything I had ever experienced. Afterward, we lay side by side, our bodies glistening with a fine layer of sweat, our breathing gradually normalizing. There was a post-experience intimacy distinct from what I knew with men, less performative, more authentic and devoid of expectations. So, Fair finally said, her voice still a bit hoarse, now I understand why Michelle reacted that way. I laughed, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in weeks. Me too, and I think the neighbors now know as well. This, she said, turning to face me, was much better than I imagined. And look, I have a very active imagination. Better than with Ardor? I asked, surprising myself with the question. An enigmatic smile appeared on her lips. Different, neither better nor worse, just. I nodded, understanding perfectly. That's how I felt too. I wasn't comparing Fair with Pedro or judging one experience as superior to the other. They were simply distinct, each valuable in its own way. And what about Pedro? She asked, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my shoulder. What about him? Are you still upset? I reflected for a moment, making an honest inventory of my feelings. Yes and no. I'm hurt by the way it happened, but maybe he did me a favor. He freed me to explore other possibilities. Fair smiled, depositing a soft kiss on my shoulder. Like this one. Like this one, I confirmed, and maybe others I haven't even imagined yet. We remained silent for a moment, absorbing the implications of the night, the new dimensions we had added to our friendship. Is York still your #1 plan? She finally asked. Yes, I responded without hesitation. But maybe I'll go with a different perspective now. Less rigidity, more openness to the unexpected. I think that deserves a toast, she said, reaching for the almost empty wine bottle. To Sofia, who is finally learning that not every territory needs to be mapped before being explored. We toasted, and as the last sip of wine went down my throat, I felt a deep gratitude for this friendship that now had a new dimension. Pedro might have disappointed me, but in his place, I discovered a facet of myself that I didn't know existed. A more free Sofia, more open to experiences, less tied to expectations. It was an exchange that, at that moment, seemed perfectly fair.